So much about debt. You would think they'd be interested in saving money. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Phil Twyford.
This will be good.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make 3 points. The first is that the national government's fetish with building new state highway projects, otherwise known as the roads of national significance, has crowded out and squeezed out every other category of government funding, including local roads, sir. Local roads, and all over New Zealand, provincial communities are having to face up to the fact that this government has slashed the funding for local roads. My second point, sir, is that the RONs themselves are poor value for money overall, and this national government has utterly corrupted the whole process of evaluating the economic value of these infrastructure projects. My third point, Mr. Chairman, is that the national government's approach to transport is so completely unbalanced. It is so imbalanced in favour of roads, sir, that important other parts of our transport network are suffering. And I'm talking particularly about public transport, and I want to talk some more about that, and also Kiwi Rail, sir, as a vital piece of our national transport infrastructure, has been set up to fail by this national government. But let me go back to local roads, sir, because I recently, in the last recess, travelled around parts of the South Island, including Invercargill and Southland, but also including parts of Otago and Clutha, Queenstown Lake, Central Otago. And what I found, every place that I visited, sir, I found the community, the local council, the local mayor, very upset with the national government for having cut their funding to local roads. And even if I may say so, Mr. Chairman, the people of Southland were particularly embittered by the fact that the national government has cut the funding for local roads in that area. And as you will know, sir, that Southland has...
Order, you can't bring the chair into the debate.
Sorry, sir, as I was saying...
The member can traverse the area he is, but he must not bring me into it.
As I was saying, sir, the member for Southland knows well that area has the largest network of local roads in the country, one of the smallest bases of ratepayers, and is feeling the financial squeeze because of the policies of this government, sir. And everywhere I went, the people in those communities said, you know what, we haven't seen Bill English for a long time around here. We haven't seen Jackie Deans for a long time in Alexandra. She hasn't shown up since the last election. And they said, when you go back to Parliament, say to the national MPs, we'd quite like to see them, we'd quite like them to show up, and we'd like them to explain why rural and provincial New Zealand has been hung out to dry by this government. They're told they have to pay more for their local roads. They don't want to subsidise the roads of national significance because they know that mostly they are a crock, they are a waste of taxpayers' money, they are badly spent billions and billions and billions of dollars of taxpayers' money wasted on projects that will be white elephants around the necks, just like the Think Big projects. It's Think Big all over again, and this government proceeds to waste billions of dollars of taxpayers' money, and they don't care if rural and provincial New Zealand have to subsidise their follies, sir. It might be justifiable, it might be defensible if the roads of national significance made economic sense to this country, sir, but they do not. Most of the roads of national significance would never have been built 5 years ago because their benefit-cost ratios are so low. Several of these gold-plated motorway projects were made roads of national significance even before the most basic economic assessment had been done. The analysis had been done of their worth. But no, the Colossus of roads, Stephen Joyce, the former Transport Minister, he declared with a great triumphalism that National was going to build these 7 great motorway projects come hell or high water. And we found out the other day that more than $200 million has been spent by this government on design and investigation work for motorway projects, many of which will not be built for a very long time. That is absolute profligacy. There is no justification for it. And you know what? Under this government, transport has become a kind of Bermuda Triangle of government spending. Vast amounts of cash go missing constantly, nobody can explain it, and the normal rules of public sector financial management somehow don't seem to apply. It's amazing. And what did we have the other day? We had Jerry Brownlee, Mr Speaker, Mr Chair.
Phil Twyford.
We had Jerry Brownlee saying that one of the things you've got to be careful about is relying constantly on cost-benefit analysis. So
What's the cost
that's
benefit of the
very
railway?
strange.
What's the cost
so
benefit of the
$12
railway?
billion in the next 10 years on the so-called roads of national significance, and the benefit-cost ratios, for some reason, are a bit overrated. You mustn't rely on them. It's very strange. But when it comes to something like the City Rail link in Auckland, oh, well, then the benefit-cost ratios are very important.
Point 3.
And in fact, the City Rail link has to be subjected to the government's Better Business guidelines. That makes complete sense. Why not? We want our government infrastructure spending to be sensible, to be well spent, to be rigorously tested. But that does not apply to the roads of national significance, sir. And this government should be ashamed of the absolute profligacy. That's right, the roads of national vote buying. Sir, the third point I wanted to make is that transport under this government is so completely unbalanced. And the City Rail link is a really good example of that. Not only was the Mayor of Auckland elected on a platform of building the City Rail link, not only do the opinion polls tell us that an overwhelming majority of Aucklanders regard that as the #1 transport project, not only has its business case been internationally peer-reviewed, not only will it double the capacity of the existing rail network in Auckland, not only will the Britomart hit capacity by 2020 unless the City Rail link is built, sir, but this government itself has no plan to deal with Auckland's traffic congestion. They have no idea, they have no plan. The Minister sits in this House day after day and rubbishes the City Rail link, and yet he has got nothing constructive to put on the table to address the problem of traffic congestion in our country's biggest city. All the Minister has got, is a proposal for the Ministry of Transport has written up that would see 1,000 diesel buses in the Auckland Central Business District per hour. 1,000 buses an hour, sir. And that demonstrates the utter bankruptcy of transport thinking by this government. My last point, sir, is about Kiwi Rail.
That's 4.
The government loves to trumpet the turnaround plan. $750 million they're going to put into Kiwi Rail's capital expenditure. And yet, the real story about the turnaround plan is that Kiwi Rail is being forced to put in $4.75 billion from its own balance sheet. This is not some act of charity by the government. Kiwi Rail is having to pump its own balance sheet for $4.75 billion. And that, sir, that completely unrealistic turnaround plan is forcing Kiwi Rail to do things like lay off 220 track workers and defer 3 weeks of track maintenance. 3 years of track maintenance. It's forcing them to do crazy things like sell off the Hillside Rail workshops, sell off the tourism side of the business. The member doesn't like to hear this because he's ashamed. He's embarrassed by this government's transport policy. It's forcing Kiwi Rail to close regional lines and regional commuter services like the Capital Connection. Sir, it's unrealistic. This government doesn't like rail, it doesn't believe in Kiwi Rail, it's setting Kiwi Rail up to fail. Because of the turnaround plan and the completely unrealistic financial targets in it, Kiwi Rail is in a situation where it's chopping one limb off after another, sir, and soon it will be left only with a torso. Nowhere else in the world is a national railway expected to run as a standalone corporation and turn a profit. It is a vital piece of our country's transport infrastructure. This government doesn't believe that. It's setting Kiwi Rail up to fail. Instead of investing properly in a multimodal approach, and I'm afraid to say, sir, that the junior minister and the chair wouldn't know a multimodal approach to transport if he fell over it on a dark night, sir. National's transport policy is unbalanced. They have a fetish with building new state highway projects at the expense of every other activity class in the transport budget. That, sir, is leading to the neglect of local roads. They have cut the funding for new public transport infrastructure. The minister would know it if he bothered to pay attention, but he's so obsessed with building his his roads of National Party significance, sir, that he doesn't give the time of day to any other major transport project. They are wasting billions and billions of dollars of precious taxpayers' dollars in a difficult financial climate, and they should be ashamed.
The Honourable Tau Henare.
Mr. Speaker, this is supposed to be about transport.